Good morning, Nelson County. Welcome to this morning's edition of the Community Brew Live. We have lots of panelists, as you can see this morning. Super excited to feature these incredible building innovators and kick off our conversation this morning. So if you are joining us for the first time, definitely hop over to the chat, say hello, good morning, and let us know you're here. So we had a little bit of a glitch this morning with taking down our stream, so we kind of had to switch links. So hopefully you guys are here. Definitely tell your friends and your coworkers, just in case they had the wrong link, that they are here and ready to have a conversation with us this morning. So with that being said, I'm going to throw the mic over to Tiffany Clark, who is going to be our host this morning.
Good morning, everyone. So excited to be here and lead this conversation with people from all across the district. We have one representative from every building, I believe, and this is our Building Innovator panel. So we're going to start this morning with introducing everyone and which school you come from. Who wants to start? Don't forget to unmute your mic.
I can start. Madeline Tucker, Bloomfield Middle School.
I'm Sarah Greenwell at Cox's Creek Elementary.
Amy Kroll at New Haven School.
Helen McCauley at Boston School.
I'm Jessica Lee. I'm Jessica Lee, occupational therapist for the district.
Jennifer Ballard at OKH.
I'm Alexis Perry at Bloomfield Elementary.
Mary Gomer from Foster Heights Elementary.
I'm Cindy Willis from Thomas Nelson High School.
We have one more. Nicole, can you hear us? I see you.
Yes.
Okay. Yep.
Nicole Pinkston, Early Learning Center.
Awesome. Thanks, guys, for logging on with us this morning. And if it's your first, welcome to Community Brew Live. So we had two different, a reading and a podcast that was shared out yesterday, the day before. My days all run together at this point. One from EWA and then one podcast from Modern Learners. And it was Sylvia Martinez. So we will start this morning really talking through kind of what we think it means to empower students. The biggest piece of this really came from the podcast when Sylvia was talking about power within our culture, what it looks like in a classroom. She goes above and beyond and kind of talks through administrators and that kind of thing too. But when we think about the power within our schools with students, is really what we wanted to focus on today. So was there anything you guys read through or listened to in that podcast when you thought about empowering students and kind of handing the learning back over to them that really stood out to you all?
I can start. There was one thing it talked about exploring learning on their own terms. And one of the things that popped out at me was, do you let them do the project? You give them, okay, say, I'm going to have them do this project. Do you let them just kind of give them just the scenario and say, let them just go? Or do you make them and see how that evolves? Or do you make them do a draft and have 4 drafts and turn around and edit it and then do the project? So that kind of stood out at me as kind of remind me of the Preston projects that some of the across the county has done a little bit. Do you do it more like that? Or do you just kind of let them just, you have to do the papers like we've always done, and then you get to do it?
I think she talks through, several different topics of that same thing as like, we have to kind of let go and be okay with some failure at that point and know that we have to give a little bit of guidance, but the more we give, the less power they have kind of thing. So it made me think through, really letting go for ourselves more than our kids. They're going to be eager to really move through whatever's in their head versus what we think it must look like. I think that would be the hardest component of that, would be what we think it has to look like.
I found it interesting on the podcast because it said something that I wrote down, and it said that empowerment isn't pretty. And I think as educators, so much of that, when we say empower students, and we think that it takes power away from us. And so it seems like it would be chaos. But I think that is how we bridge the gap We have to combine progressive education and regular traditional education. Sylvia said, do it all at once, that it's not going to be pretty, but that's the point. And I think as educators, sometimes it's more about us having control versus letting the students really flourish in their own abilities.
Well, I'll pop in here real quick. We've got lots of people hanging out with us over on YouTube land. I have to tell you guys, though, Mr. Bradley's watching, and he said that we have a strong group this morning. Not just innovators, but probably a strong Pride Games dodgeball team, too. So, Mr. Bradley's got jokes over there this morning in the YouTube chat. So thank you all for joining us. Definitely drop your comments in too if you're hopping in for the first time. I see a lot of new names over there in the chat panel. So we definitely want your voice as part of our conversation as well this morning.
So from the reading to it, she talked, whoever the author was, I looked multiple times and either I missed it or couldn't find it. But they talk about, allowing students to connect their works to issues that they care about. They're going to be more engaged and more motivated if it's topics that they care about. So there was multiple examples that were thrown into that reading as well. But one of the things I noted was the 4 elements that they discussed, which was personalized. And she talks about personalization or personalized learning versus actual kids being empowered to lead their own learning was a little bit different, but also talked about competency based and accessible anytime and anywhere, and then owned by the student. We know now more than anything that learning can take place anywhere, and that is the important component of that. So when you think about those elements or what we're trying to think through, even during this NTI experience, what do you think the important components of that are at this point? How do we make the next potentially several weeks powerful for kids?
I know that at Cox's Creek, one of our, I think it was either Janine or Kelsey, they were trying to make an authentic writing experience. And it was about the COVID, talking about, okay, and embracing it, and how can you take this situation and, okay, how's it affecting you guys? What, it's kind of just been playing around with right now, but talking about, okay, how do you make this, showing the feelings through this paper, trying to make some type of prompt that shows the kids and they could explore, okay, how are they feeling, shows their feelings with it, how's it affecting their family, what you think do you need to be doing during this time, what could help you guys with your learning during this time, and different things like that. So I know that that's something that's kind of been talked about a little bit too, is trying to embrace this situation.
Mary, I'm gonna put you on the spot now. So Mary and I were talking before this started, and she was much more eager to have this conversation. But 2 of the things that were talked about in both the reading and the podcast talked about motivation and engagement. And I know one or the other talked about every year engagement decreases. So Mary was saying she's really kind of struggling with this because of her connection to students. So Mary, do you want to talk about kind of your tension right now and where you feel like when you're face to face with kiddos, what that looks like versus now, when you think about engagement and really passion, I think is what you were talking about too.
Sure, thanks, Tiffany. In our classroom, we do a lot of things hands-on, like all the time. They always have things in their hands. They're always doing things, and they get to lead a lot of learning because, Mr. Jones and I will have like an end in mind of where we want to go with a lesson, like ultimately what we're trying to get out of it. But they'll bring up questions and we'll kind of go in their direction. Like just as an example, we did this health thing where our end in mind was that they were going to create the activities the school would do during the jump rope for heart. So we have 5 days of jump rope for heart, and they're always set like this day's yoga, this day's Zumba, this day's whatever. And our class or our grade level was going to design one of those days. So when all the grade levels went to the gym, they were going to do the activities that our kids created. And so we were doing like just a whole health thing about exercise or whatever. But then it ended up turning into like, I don't even remember what the questions were the kids asked, but it ended up being things about we measured out the amount of sugar in the drinks that they drank and the foods that they ate. So we did a survey about what do you drink at home? And then we taught them about grams and how to use a gram scale, which isn't something that we were to yet. That would, if we were just straight up doing math and sections, that would come towards the end of the year. But it came up at that time that they were, we learned how to read a nutrition label, and it was like, whoa, is that actually a lot of sugar or not? Because we realized that 32 grams doesn't mean anything to them. So that pivoted into us measuring out sugar and items and then visually seeing. And so that was really cool. And so we do a lot of that in our room. We just kind of go with the questions they have, but we still ultimately get to an end that we want them at. And now, like, I'm struggling because I feel like I'm doing the more traditional teaching now where I am making slides of here's a list of things to do today, because I can't put that stuff in their hand in the same way. And I'm still mailing something out once a week so they have a little bit of things in their hands. I mailed them lima bean seeds because we were doing life cycles in science, and I'm hatching chicken eggs in my basement right now because that's something I do every year. So they just get little video updates of me candling the eggs so they can still see the insides of them. But it's not the same as them getting to hold those eggs and doing that themselves. So I'm really struggling with this because I hate this. I want to go back to what we usually do.
Well, I'm going to jump in on that part of the conversation. We've got a lot of comments happening out here. Madeline, I think there's 3 or 4 different people who are going to quote you today on empowerment isn't pretty, that it's messy. Haley Victory, Kelsey Berryman, everybody is like definitely yay, yay, yay on that comment, which I totally agree with. And Kathy Walker is watching too. She hopped in and says that I have learned from experience that when we let children go, they always surprise us and achieve more than we expect. And, listen to you talk, Mary, about the way that, learning takes place in your classroom. I have to share a story yesterday. My daughter, who is like a replica of me, she's 8, and she is online shopping. Surprise. And she's put all this stuff in a shopping cart, and she has a certain amount of money, and she literally has a notebook and a pen beside her, and she's like calculating taxes and how much money she can, or how much money or how many things she can buy based on the taxes, and she's doing all this math. And I was just like really blown away from our experience last week, where I'm trying to get her to do like math on paper, and like just the juxtaposition of those two experiences, and like just like you said, letting the kids guide the learning experience. It's just definitely been a very eye-opening experience for like this mama. So I love it. It's just really inspiring.
And I think more than a lot, teachers and us in education are learning how to do personalized learning and authentic learning. So now you throw these kids home with parents all the time. They are not comfortable with this learning at all. So, Brooke, just like you were saying, another mother, if they don't have the mindset of, oh, they're calculating taxes and how much they have left and how much shipping and then it's just like, stop playing, you're just shopping, you're just wasting money. But like us as educators have that mindset of, okay, take this real life situation and flip it to where it is educational based. And I think in this position right now, we have to be able to relay that information to parents to make them feel comfortable of, hey, it is a crazy time right now, but what you're doing can be educationally based too. Like real life situations are more important than worksheets.
Yeah, that's exactly. I was just getting ready to yeah, for sure, because I think like as teachers and educators, we're in unique positions because we're doing both right now. We're, momming and parenting, and we're also thinking about education, but helping our parents see those opportunities too as learning experiences right now. I think are equally important as well. And there's lots of comments happening over here. That's basically, yes, like don't discount those experiences. And I think serving our parents and our stay-at-home caregivers in this weird world right now, and helping them recognize those learning experiences is really important as well. Christy Morris is piping in. She says those real world, authentic purposes are motivating to students. When kids are all in, that's when the magic happens.
So this is going to take us kind of in towards the end of the podcast. They start talking about, and I think there was a couple of us on a little bit earlier that were talking about this too. So they talk about the change in education, that usually this change doesn't occur until some kind of revolution, but it's usually not because educators decide this is what needs to happen. So they talk about how school would change and what would it take. We kind of giggled a little bit. We're like, we might be in that right now. Like, we are really having to think through what school looks like, what the purpose is. And we have a culture within Nelson County Schools that, taking risk and failing is okay. So we're already 3 steps ahead when we think about this. So my next question to you guys is really, what kind of experiences do we need to create when we think about maybe in 3 weeks when we come back, or the beginning of next year? What might that look like for students when we really let them lead? The other thing that she talked about too was the importance of letting them lead their own learning, because it starts where they are. Everyone can start at a different place and take learning at their own pace, as well as, in the direction they want. So let's go back to that. What experiences might we think through when we have kids within our groups again?
This makes me think of my son yesterday. So the related arts teachers are doing kind of like they're having the kids do flip grids, and I think it was sink or float activities in kindergarten, and we were over in the sink, and he was able to actually do that on his own. So he was so excited. He's like, "Mom, fill the sink up." So he was sitting there filling the sink up, and then he was finding objects around here. There's a couple objects. I was like, "No, you can't put that in water." And he was sitting there doing it, and he was like, "All right, this one did, Mom, and this one didn't." And I was like, "What do you think this is going to do?" He said, "I think this is going to do it." And then I had to get on the computer, and him and my 4-year-old went over there and were doing that. And they kept doing it. So they honestly probably played in the sink for 20 minutes. So I ended up having a meeting. And I thought things like that, even from just even the related arts, are bringing stuff in, starting to now. So I think as we come across, I feel like the ideas are going to start flowing even more. But I thought that was a really good experience just for him, because then he was also able to do it independently whenever, because that's something that we have to think about too, is can they do it independently, as well as whenever the parents, or if you're working or something, if they're home, they might still have to be working.
I love that. Something else, it made me think of that when Sarah was talking, is if we as adults and as leaders of education in this community feel valued, we're automatically all in. Like, if it's something that matters to me, then I'm all in. And I think sometimes in a classroom, we forget that we don't have to overthink it. If kids love it and they're into it, then they're going to be all in. And I think that as educators, we overthink that. We try to make these big, beautiful lessons on a slide, and a lot of times go into a classroom and it bombs. And it's like, oh, like I overthought that. So I think as we continue to do this, it's giving them the value in the classroom, like what matters to them at the end of the day. We can all be at the same ending point, just like Mary said, but we need to value them. Not that we don't, but we just need to show it more in the classroom with empowerment and with choice. And I think sometimes that's the art of teaching, and how we bring all that together in a really beautiful way.
Oh, I mean, I can start calling on people. I feel like that's probably not appropriate in a Google Meet, but I can see all of your faces, and I know the conversations we've had before. So quit being shy on YouTube Live, okay?
I will say one thing that I've enjoyed is, obviously my son's in preschool, but the ELC, they sent home just choice activities. And I mean, they're all fun and still learning, but it's just a choice. There's no set day he has to do anything. And so I mean, there's probably over 100 activities in this thing. And so he loves it because I'll just sit down and at this point he knows them all, like I've read them all off or whatever, but he picks what he wants to do that day. And I know my child well enough to know he has enough of me in him that if I said today we're going to do this, like he would throw a screaming fit in the floor and go, I don't want to do that today. I'm like, but you love I Spy. We play I Spy all the time. Not today, blah, blah. But since he can just pick, like today I want, we did the bear hunt activity yesterday where we put the bear in the window and went through the neighborhood and listened to the book and all that kind of stuff. But he picked that, and I didn't want to do that yesterday because I had parents to call, so I wanted to do something quick in the house, and he's like, no, I want to go walk through the neighborhood. But I love that they give the kids choices, and I think that's important, whereas a lot of times this is our agenda today and here's what it is. So just kudos to ELC for that, and as a mom I appreciate that.
So yeah, the podcast definitely talks about that a lot. I think her specific thing was she said, we really have to think about, we give kids very little choice when they come to school. For one, it's not an option, they have to come. So they already lose power at that point. And she talks about, for that and us saying, okay, now you have to do X, then Y, then Z. We give them no choices. And a lot of that, they still comply. They're still really good at it. She also then goes into, if we change things, then we give them the power back, right? We allow them to create their learning opportunities. She talked about, be willing or understand that they are going to push back. Your kids who are really good at school are going to continue to like wait you out. Like if I wait long enough, they'll tell me like, you have to have 3 paragraphs, or you have to have 4 bullets, or you have to do these things. So she did talk about, slowly stepping in and changing the culture in individual classrooms could be more powerful than just kind of letting everybody go, because then you're going to have a little bit of resistance. So when we think about that, we talked about chaos. Like, is it you let go and like chaos ensues your classroom? But more or less, she talks about structures. So she talks about thinking through the structures that we have to create to let them lead their own learning. Are there components that you think would be important in creating those structures when we think about really giving them the power back to learn around topics they want to learn?
I do think that there has to be some structure because some kids need that structure, but it's going to be trying to find the structure that works for them, as well as also letting them kind of explore. It's kind of like that fine line. I have some kids, if they don't have that structure, then they have meltdowns. Like I have one student that she has a schedule that she wants to have it and see it. And I think kids like that, I think it's going to actually have to adapt based on that kid. And that's whenever that differentiation comes in. Okay, how's this going to look for each kid? And how are we going to change it to work for the multiple styles of these kids in this classroom, and what is going to work best for them? And I think that's the conversation. And that's the big conversation is to have to think about. And I think one of the things from the podcast was you like also adapting and changing as our society changes. I think I heard that somewhere in there. And okay, and what does that look like? Our society is constantly changing, and we have to adapt. And I'm not going to lie, 10 years ago when I first started teaching, we still had the projectors. And I don't feel like I'm that old, but it has changed so much. There's even things that some of the newer teachers coming in, their first year teachers know that I don't know. And I'm still trying to adapt at the fast pace that it's going. And that I'm sure our kids are going to have to, that we're going to have to try to learn as much as we can. And they're going to probably learn it quicker than us.
Lexus, I'm going to call you out because I can definitely see you, and we've had these conversations multiple times. So it is your turn, friend, to talk through some of the things that we've talked about, because I know you have some great ideas and you've been thinking through this.
So one thing that I find very important when you're moving towards more of a project base is the way that we've got to start is with respect. At Bloomfield, we spend a lot of time beginning of the year building those relationships and setting up a classroom with respect. And that's something that's got to happen before we can turn everybody loose, because if everybody starts with that group mentality, then they are able to perform better, and they want to do their best. So I think that's really important when we start giving them more power, is to also know that they are going to respect the power that we're giving them.
I'll pop in over here on the YouTube chat. We've got some good conversations rolling over here. Let's see, we've got Laura Mann was made the comment, one of our impossible librarians. She says, my parents saw everything as a learning opportunity. Sometimes it was annoying. Sometimes they included me in some really cool stuff because it was educational, cooking, gardening, cars, of all of it. And let's see, we've got the Irvinator over here again, Amber Irvin. She said kids also need the opportunity to fail in their explorations. I know for me personally, I have learned so much more from mistakes than I have from success. We have Kelsey Berryman. She said, risk taking is a cultural shift in the classroom. Students will eventually become more comfortable with the mystery and will rocket through our imposed ceilings. That is a really stinking powerful quote there, Kelsey. Lots of really great ideas. Y'all are gonna have to go back. I can't read them all, but there's some really awesome conversations happening on this topic over there in the chat.
Right, so it looks like we have about 3 minutes. So I wanted to kind of wrap up with the last question and really think things through. We talked about, you know, really the place that we're at right now and it being a little bit different than what we would do in a classroom. So with our kind of final thoughts, what is something from now, thinking around NTI, what is something you think that would be important to think through with students and parents to really change the trajectory and think around passions and interests versus maybe some of the work that is currently being given? What opportunities might exist? Jennifer Ballard, we can see you're on here too, by the way.
Sorry, I've been running back and forth between breaking up wrestling matches and trying to engage in this. One thing I'm doing in my yearbook class is my kids are taking a hobby that they're looking at and trying to turn it into a business. So their end game with it is whatever they create. And I'm just providing engaging questions for them to think about on the journey so that they can read, they can write, and they can watch videos about Walt Disney, who took his hobby of drawing and turning it into a business, actually a multi-million-dollar corporation. And so the kids are really driving this whole lesson, and it was hard. Like it's hard to let go, but doing so, I have learned a lot more from them than what I think that they are truly getting out of this.
And again, I think it goes back to we have to empower our parents that it is okay for our kids, for the students to fail. Like that's how they will learn. Like not every assignment has to be perfect. Not every activity has to be colored to perfection. Not everything, like my kids do assignments and I check, I'm not going to read over every single one of them. That's how they learn. They're spinning it on their own. Again, I have that education where I can say, okay, that's not where I really thought it was going, but you're taking it this way and roll with it. And they're learning from that. So I think it goes back to we have to make sure our parents know it's okay if it's not perfect and it's okay if they fail. That's how they're going to learn. Thanks, y'all. Sorry I had to go to extreme measures and call people out, but for some reason y'all want to be super shy when that's not usually how you guys are. So thanks, Brooke, for leading us.
Yes, it happens as soon as that live button comes on. Everybody kind of is like, what is that? So thank you guys for joining us today. We have a very special treat for you all tomorrow. So tomorrow is Wednesday. Is that right? That's right. Okay, I just need a head nod. Okay, just want to make sure my days are right. So tomorrow morning, we will be featuring our wellness leaders in the district, and Robin McCoy will be hosting us. However, tomorrow is extra special because we want you to tune in 30 minutes early. So 8 o'clock, we will have a live workout. You don't have to come into the live experience, but you're just going to join us here on YouTube, just like normal. Jonathan Harrison is going to lead us in some wellness workouts, and my camera will be off, so no worries there. But we're going to work out from 8 to 8:30, and then our wellness leaders are just going to hop on to our panel, and we will do our normal community brew from 8:30 to 9. So we are so excited to see you guys back here tomorrow. Hopefully at 8 o'clock. We'll be sweaty, so no judgment for tomorrow. And I hope you guys have an amazing day. Thank you for joining us.